All right, I think we're going to get started pretty soon, so if you haven't taken a seat, please do so. Including our panelists, our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It is so great to have you all here. Thank you very, very much for being here. I don't take it for granted, given the fact that we are still in a pandemic, and it's also a rainy, humid night. And I know some of you even have school children that had their first day of school today, and you're still here. So I really, really appreciate it. And I have to say, given what the last year and a half has been like, there were a lot of events like this that I used to do every single night, all the time, and it got to be at times a little bit tiresome. But somehow now I've come to appreciate that these gatherings are really very, very special, and I don't take them for granted anymore. So thank you all for being here. My name is Rob Leary. I am the chairman of the National Forest Foundation, and I'm so pleased on behalf of the National Forest Foundation to thank you. We have several board members here. We have our CEO and other members of staff here. But that's not what this event is all about. What this event is all about is talking about our forests and the important role that they play in the environmental, social, and governance world, the ESG world. And in particular with global warming and with climate change, not only the importance of our forests as they currently exist, but how our forests can help transform our planet in such great ways, how important they are, but more so how important they can be as part of the solution. So we've got a great panel. I'm so thrilled to have them. I'm going to introduce I'm going to introduce our moderator in a minute or two. But first I want to thank our sponsors, and we are so grateful to all of them. So we've got Titan Advisors, Churchill Asset Management, Nuveen, a TIAA company, Southwest Airlines, McKinsey & Company, and Airstream. And so thank you so much. I just want to do a round of applause for all of you. Thank you very much. So next, I want to show a brief video about our forests and the NFF, and then I'll turn it over to Bob. Let's roll.
Water, wildlife, wonder. The national forests and grasslands that are now the centerpiece of America's public land system are the ancestral homelands of many native peoples. Our national forests reveal a world of beauty and awe, from grizzlies in Montana to delicate lupins in a New England meadow. It's not surprising that Americans make 170 million visits annually to national forests to hike, hunt, camp, boat, birdwatch, and more. The $10 billion they spend, plus the $200 million forest products industry, underscore how these lands support our economy. But there's also an invisible and vital function pulsing through these lands. Their ability to clean the air, to provide clean drinking water, and to absorb and sequester massive amounts of carbon, removing close to 15% of emissions from the air. Their role in absorbing carbon is proven, essential, and affordable. Our forests are engines of environmental healing. Their ecological benefits are immeasurably valuable in mitigating climate change. But increasingly severe and large wildfires threaten to reverse forest beneficial characteristics. In fact, current trends threaten a shift from forests holding carbon to forests releasing huge amounts of it through ever more intense wildfire. It is imperative we get ahead of this. Fortunately, the National Forest Foundation and its partners are using proven strategies to do just that. Through careful forest management that increases resiliency to large-scale reforestation, the foundation and the companies it works with are creating quantifiable improvements in forests' ability to sequester carbon, provide clean and plentiful water, and more. Here is a simple way to understand the opportunity. Over its lifetime, a typical tree in our national forest absorbs a half-ton of carbon. That's right, every tree. And just one national forest can encompass hundreds of millions of trees. With 154 national forests coast to coast, that's over 15 trillion tons of carbon removed from the atmosphere each year. The math starts to boggle the mind, but so does the specter of not acting. We have all stepped into a new era of heightened climate and carbon awareness, of a growing urgency for solutions. Today, stakeholders are demanding that corporate interests align with long-term environmental, social, and governance interests. The National Forest represents an untapped opportunity for the smartest possible investment in a healthier future. The National Forest Foundation is working with America's leading corporations to ensure investment in our forests pays the dividends we know are possible. We do this through tailored public-private partnerships. We plant trees, 25 million as of 2021. This project on the Lolo National Forest is just one of the hundreds of examples. We reduce risk of destructive fire and improve how forests function. In California, for example, we are leading multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects to increase forest resiliency against changing conditions. We invest in the next generation. Our programs engage young people in caring for and learning about our forests, building the leadership we need for the future. Rapid evolution of corporate environmental, social, and governance strategies is opening profound new ways companies are holding themselves publicly accountable to a more sustainable future. Join us to envision how your industry, your company, you can integrate climate-beneficial forest investments into your ESG strategy.
Great video. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our moderator, who will introduce our panel. Our moderator is an unbelievably distinguished journalist who's been a correspondent, an anchor, a person who's reported on issues all over the world and stories all over the world. He's a master storyteller. ABC News, Discovery, Planet Green, Focus Earth, number of different things. He's also been a dear friend of mine for over 40 years, and we spent a lot of time hiking, camping, and doing other things in our national lands and having a lot of fun. It's my great pleasure to introduce Bob Woodruff.
That's the nicest thing he's ever said about me. He's more fun here than he is at the parties, without my wife around. But it's an honor to be here. I'm going to introduce this amazing panel in a second, but I have to talk a bunch of words first before I do that about why I'm here. I think about, forests are a huge part of our life. I really have not been the reporter, reporting about forests, but I grew up living in forests, hunting in forests, camping in forests, and I think back then I just never really thought about anything was a problem surrounding forests. This was not a problem, a crisis in the world that was living in our backyards. I became a lawyer, practiced that for 4 years, and decided to go into journalism after witnessing some tragedies that was happening over in China when I happened to be teaching over there. And came back, and one of the very first story that I did at all when I was a reporter was in northern California in the Shasta County. In 1992, there was a gigantic fire. And since then, when I was in local news, which I'm trying to learn how to do this whole type of work, is I had to do the shooting, the editing, the writing, the live truck out in the middle of this. I wandered myself in vehicles into the fires of the Shasta, which was one of the worst in the history at that time anyway. in California, and I thought, there's a good chance I will die if I keep doing these stupid things. So I did it anyway, which is the way I stuck to for my entire career as a journalist. The forest fires were not quite as bad as the ID explosions of Iraq, but hey, it was fun while I was doing it. But I think that it's interesting that in terms of a reporter, the relevancy of what's happening with the forests was not even close to how crucial it's become right now. I think it is now in our backyards, and why the forests and the trees can be a solution, or certainly an advancement into what we're trying to deal with, to try to deal with global warming. It's interesting that my cousin, who's the first female agricultural dean in any universities in the United States, she was at the University of Wisconsin, and now she has moved away from dealing with starvation and hunger. Her concentration now, she's working with the government and also with DARPA to try to, in the world of the climate, all the information now is being shared amongst forces that did not share information about before. So the military wants to know the facts of what's happening in terms of the climate in every one of these countries. The investment companies want to know what it is. The insurance companies want to know. The reporters like us want to know. Real estate world wants to know what's happening. And they are now sharing information because we've got to be able to deal with refugees flooding over the borders to other parts of the world, because that's what this climate is doing to all of us as it is, like I said, in our backyard. So the kind of work that you're all doing and you're supporting, I think, to me personally, is probably the most crucial thing in our country. I mean, it's great to save people's lives and to keep people from dying and having medical advancements and all that, but that's kind of today. Now we're talking about, our grandchildren, or even our children, right? About doing something about it. So this is one reason why I'm here too, not just because Rob was going to say really nice things about me, although I didn't really predict that, but also because I think it's so crucial. I know that this is kind of a fun thing. Since I'm not the expert on this topic, which is what the panel is for, I thought it'd be kind of fun when they came up with this idea. Is it your idea about doing the paddle? So we're going to have these little paddles, right? So we're going to ask you a couple questions, and you guys can answer. Put your vote on a yes or a no. I guess they decided not to do a white and a blue and a red to make this political. So this is like the green one is the yes on it, and this is the no on it. And then I'm going to ask you to, when you vote on a letter of the question about what the answer is. Now, I'm sure you're all brilliant. You're going to get the answers right. So we're going to ask a question. If you guys can pop it up on the screen. So I'm going to ask you a question, and then you have to answer what your thoughts are. Which is the larger land base, national forests or national parks? A, national forests. Yeah, only greens. So you can't vote against one. Doesn't make sense. B, national parks. Roughly the same. The answer is, or do I have to read it? Anybody? Answer, national forest, 193 million acres. National parks are 85 million acres. I can't remember who won. Who's anybody counting these? I don't know. All right, the next question, and I think you can win. This is, I think you can win. I think it's about $10,000. Whoever wins this one. Just kidding. Which major U.S. city gets its drinking water from a national forest? Which major U.S. city gets its drinking water from a national forest? Los Angeles, Portland, Denver, Atlanta. By the way, I forgot to tell you that Rob told me that this would be great because you have the chance to paddle a journalist, which is a lot of people want to do. So it'll be good. Anyway, the answer is all of you above. So it's about 1/5 of all the drinking water in the U.S. comes from watersheds on national forest lands. All right, so some people got it wrong. I think that's good. Okay, now the next one. So how much carbon on average can a single tree sequester over its lifetime? 50 pounds? 300 pounds? That's my weight. 1,100 pounds. You guys knew it had to be the highest one. The answer is 1,100 pounds, or approximately 1/2 of a metric ton of carbon dioxide per tree. I think that was interesting watching the video today. When you look at when they're alive, they're doing a damn good thing with a lot of the. But if it's burning, it's the opposite impact of it. So, I remember early, and I'm sure maybe you talk about it too, but growing up, the plan was to never burn anything down. Just let it, never trim it, don't cut any trees down between the others, which I think we've learned so much about trees and try to maintain the forest. Some of you, Mary, will know about it. We talk about that. So, all right, so we're not done with our questions. The next, is it true that smoke from wildfires can travel for hundreds of miles? Oh, you live in New York, huh? I gotcha, yeah. It's interesting, my daughter, Catherine, she's now 28 years old, and she lives in Berkeley. And so she literally, when one of these fires lit up and she couldn't barely breathe, she flew back to New York and lived with us for the next week just to get away from the smoke of it. And it didn't work. It was right here, too. So we can do all sorts of jokes about smoke going across the country. But it's absolutely true. All right, so everybody's correct on that one. Next one. Who here experienced gray skies on the East Coast from the summer? Western wildfires? Okay, you already answered that question, right? I like that one. I think we have more. Is that it? Okay. Are you aware of companies, your own or others, that include forests as part of their ESG strategy? Everybody in this room does? Anybody doesn't have anything that with their company? All right, that's cool. I think I can say that don't piss Rob off, if you don't do what he wants. That's what I do. Anyway, so with that, I'd like to introduce this panel that we have here. And for that, I got to grab my piece of paper. Here it is. Okay. All right. So Karen Fong, who's the managing director, head of global sustainable finance at Bank of America. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I met once before. Jose Minaya, who's is the chief executive officer of Nuveen, a $900 billion global asset manager of equities, fixed income, real estate, private equity. You want me to keep going the list?
1.2 trillion.
Yeah, made this really long.
Yeah.
1.2 trillion.
And then Lila Preston joined Generation Investment Management in 2004 and is head of the growth equity strategy. Thank you so much for joining too. Now, Robin was asking whether I should go in front and kind of ask questions that way so I can kind of face you, but I decided, since I just had partial knee replacement like 2 months ago, I'm going to sit down, if that's okay, to ask questions. And I didn't wave my paddle, so I didn't win anything. Anyway, if I could, I know that each one of you, I'd love to just ask you some very basic questions, since again you're the ones that know this more than anybody else, and please don't feel like you have to keep the questions short. And one times when I interview people, that I love it when you can just rip into each other too. If one says that's ridiculous, I totally disagree with it. Yeah, just watch television. You can see what I'm talking about. Right?
Watch CNN.
Yeah, CNN or Fox, whatever side you're on, right? Exactly. Extreme right and left. I guess the first thing is what is it? And this is a very general question, because we talked about that this has become a problem or a concern for everybody now in the world, and I think we've never had anybody waking up to a problem that has kind of been ignored because we didn't want to talk about it for a long time. What do you think that companies can do, and what your companies are doing, to try to use the forest to do something good for the climate? I know that's about the broadest question you probably get, but if you could summarize, each one of you, what do you think you are doing and what can be done? You're right next to me.
All right. I got the prize. They're gonna have to disagree with me and
I was gonna say,
attack,
that's
attack
ridiculous.
whatever I say. So as Rob and Bob mentioned, I run global sustainable finance at Bank of America. I had the pleasure of working for Rob, and he's probably one of my best bosses in my prior firm, so I have no choice but to come to this today and divulge all my secrets. But I'm very, very honored to be
So
here.
you worked for his wife, Nora, who's his boss.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
Ultimately, Nora. Everybody works for Nora. So I've been with the bank for 11 years. I've been on Wall Street for 20 plus years. Not going to tell you exactly how many years, so you can figure out how old I am. But the sustainable finance job is a dream job for me, and that's a job that Brian Moynihan, our CEO at Bank of America, created for me about a year and a half ago. So I was doing a lot of asset financing. I was running global market sales and trading businesses, and similar to the business I ran for Rob before. But the things I loved the most was to finance wind and solar power, energy efficiency, and looking at creative asset classes that can allow us to do good and do well. So when they said, to me that you can do this full time, I was like, yes. So to answer the question that Bob asked me will kind of bring me to what we're doing and why this job is actually really, really important for Bank of America, but also for all of our corporate clients. So when you think about the globe, we emit about 53 billion tons of CO2 today. And as you know, we rejoined the Paris Climate Treaty, on the first day of Biden's administration, and we have now repledged net zero by 2050. And obviously, the new administration is doing everything they can, technology solutions, nature-based solutions, to make sure we're on track to fulfill our commitment to have interim targets that are science-based, that reduce our carbon emissions across all major industry sectors, from energy and power, transportation, consumer transportation, all of the above industrials, to basically decarbonize at a very credible pace and a very fast pace. And I don't have to tell a lot of you, because Rob, I don't know why you have an audience of, basically already, people that understand the importance of this topic, if you are preaching to the choir. But the IPCC 6th report that just came out basically said we are overheating the planet, and even if you do, get to net zero by 2050, we may not be moving fast enough. So when you think about the science-based trajectory, whether it's we have to cut emissions by 55%, which is what our government pledged, 55% by 2030, and then so on and so forth, you look at the amount of tasks in front of us. It is not just about replacing oil and gas, right, coal, with wind and solar and clean hydrogen and all of the above. You have to look at nature-based solutions. We're not going to get there, right? Not to mention we are pouring as much capital as possible into decarbonization. And the reason I'm super passionate about the work we're doing is, in the short amount of time that my team was set up, our board and our leadership team at Bank of America allowed me to set a goal that's $1.5 trillion sustainable finance commitment by 2030. That sounds like a big number. It's a drop in the bucket. The UN says we need $3 to $5 trillion a year to help with the energy transition, right? So you look at clean hydrogen, the scale it has today, the fuel cells, you look at wind and solar. Like, I love the fact that we're saying we're going to get to 50% solar power by 2050. That just came out yesterday. It is not enough. So when you look at this stat in terms of nature-based solutions, natural carbon sinks, you look at forests, you look at mangroves and coastal wetlands, you look at soil carbon, which is a huge topic for USDA and the agriculture sector. All these nature-based solutions can probably absorb 15 to 30% of that emissions we need. So the job is pretty simple, right? 53 billion tons today, we need to get to zero by 2050. So if that's 26 million tons reduction in the next 10 years, we do not have the luxury of just focusing on technology, investment, and try to deploy as much clean energy and power as possible, and have people like fly on sustainable aviation fuels, which is 1% of the global jet fuel.
Just real quick, is that a world number, or are you talking about an
Global
American
number.
number? Okay.
Global number.
And other countries participating in this as much as we would like? Or?
So most of the 193 countries have, obviously signed up to the Paris Treaty. And even China has announced 2060 net zero target. 10 years later, but nonetheless, it's a net zero target. Lacks details, skeptical, but they have a target. So we have to move faster is the point, and we have to have the two-pronged approach, technology-based and nature-based. And in the nature-based, the most proven carbon sink is forest, right? And you look at the scale, you look at what we can do on improved forest management, which Mary knows a lot about, and NFF is a leader in that. When you think about all the other newer technology, soil carbon, blue carbon, all of these things have to be used. Otherwise, we're not going to get there, right? So IPCC says we're already overheating. We're not, 2050 is already stretching it. And then we really need to get to net zero by 2040. But even with that, right now we're not focused enough on this. And I'll tell you right now, as someone who's in this every day and talking to CEOs and CFOs around the globe, there are over 2,000 companies in the world that has pledged net zero, in addition to governments, right? But these companies don't have enough tools to really fulfill their pledge. If they ignore the nature-based solutions, I can tell you it's inevitable their pledge will fail. But the attackers on greenwashing, Bank of America became carbon neutral. We bought reforestation offsets to become neutral in 2019. It's not a secret. But then people want to come back and say, well, you were lazy, you bought, offsets, and therefore, you're not really investing in the real technology. It's not or, it's and. We need to do both. So to answer your question, sorry for being long-winded, is really that the carbon reduction is a global imperative. And it is not possible that you can achieve this without focus on nature-based solutions such as reforestation. We have to do this, and we have to do this in a credible way. What the industry is lacking is taxonomy standards. Mary and Rob know this. The certification of a valid reforestation carbon offset is very difficult, expensive, not scalable. We need to reduce 26 billion tons. Just remember this number, and then I will shut up. We only produced 160 million carbon offsets last year, globally. So we don't have a certification carbon offset industry. The amount of potential we could channel this corporate dollars, not to mention government dollars, into nature-based solutions such as reforestation is not being channeled in the right way with the proper support, with the proper taxonomy, with the proper certification and verification. And that is Achilles' heel.
Jose, yeah.
Yeah, that was so. I did want to jump in and say something was ridiculous, but it was so well said. I didn't get a chance to do it. I did first want to start out by thanking everyone. I'm on the board of NFF, and just want to thank you all for the support. Full disclosure, actually worked for Rob Leary as well. He had it's a little connection there. Now, credit to me.
I feel pretty special that I did
yeah.
not work for Rob
I never
Leary.
worked for him.
Yeah. And credit to me for still doing this.
Maybe I will one day, I don't know.
I'll tell you, my first couple months of getting to know Rob, he called me Carlos for 2 months in a row. And so, but even despite that, here I am still agreeing to do this. But my approach to this and my background here is that, look, I work for a firm that has 5 decades of experience investing in real assets, right? So we own over 1 million acres of forest land around the globe. We're the largest farmland owner around the globe. We manage almost 150 billion in real estate assets, which is a big contributor, by the way, to carbon. So our approach to this in our history and education in it is one around mitigating risks, right? It was kind of understanding that if we're owning assets and we're looking to own these assets for 20, 30 plus years, it was about maintaining the integrity of those assets. And when you think about ESG, the E part is a big part of our risk, the risk factors we look at investing in these assets. So he had a history of kind of learning around, okay, these are real risks. We could see the impacts that it would do to the foundation of our assets. That really kind of helped us inform how we looked at our overall portfolio. And today, the reality is when you think about energy transition, you think about the retirement problems we have in this country, these are real risks sitting in people's portfolio. These asset transfers are going to happen. It's going to impact valuations. So again, you could look at this from obviously making the world a better place, but it is adding risk to businesses today. So you asked a question around companies and what should companies be thinking about, is understanding that this is a bottom line issue for almost every industry. And I would also say it's a perfect storm because what we're seeing today is one, your people that you're hiring, your talent, they care about this. And your ability to explain what you do as a firm and how you think about this matters to bringing in that talent to the firm. Our clients, I could tell you RFPs and just about every client request we get for due diligence, they're asking us questions around how does your firm approach ESG and climate factors and carbon footprints? And you better have an answer around that. Shareholders care a lot about this as well. So at the end of the day, from a business perspective, if you're not doing this well, have a good understanding, you are likely putting your firm at risk. More importantly, you're not going to get the capital, whether it's from your shareholders, your clients, or the ability to retain talent. So the reality is, this is here today. There was this dialogue for many years where it's like, look, if you want to do something green and nice, we can create a fund for you.
That's cute.
It's, you know, by the way, you're going to get less returns by doing it, and it's going to cost you more money because it's going to be more work. Today, clients are coming to you saying, no, we expect to get higher returns from ESG strategies. And by the way, our ESG-driven strategies are outperforming traditional strategies, and we want lower fees, by the way. So really, that dialogue has changed dramatically, literally over the last several years. It's been a trend, but today it's an imperative, which is no mistake. You're seeing a lot of my competitors, a lot of my peers, everyone's talking about this.
So
It didn't just wake up yesterday.
So there are new teams within the companies that are formed for this exact reason, to deal with about the climate, the environment.
Yeah, we probably have one of the largest focused, like, responsible investment teams, right? And it probably started with a team of 3, 4. Now it's up to almost 35, 40 people, and it's one of the areas we're hiring the most. And it's around engagement, right? So it's not about just understanding ESG, it's how are we engaging companies so that we can influence how they think about this stuff, so we can engage them in their thought, and also show attribution analysis around, you know, these risks actually hurt portfolios. But ultimately, you're seeing the entire industry you do this. You have CIOs now just for ESG. And it's the biggest growth you've seen, at least in asset management, in the last several years, that's growing. And there is a lot of greenwashing and a lot of conversations around that. And what you're seeing really with the greenwashing, firms are quickly trying to figure out, how do we do this? What do we say? You know, Ken Kinsel's here, you know, he manages middle market loans. And, you know, one of the first things coming into the organization is for middle market loans, clients saying, what are you doing around ESG? For a traditional manager, we'd be like, what do you mean at ESG? I just buy bonds or buy loans. So these teams that are growing are helping us get more informed and giving us the education of saying, okay, how do we arm our folks? How do we educate ourselves so that we can answer these questions? Because again, if you're not doing this well, you're likely not going to get the capital, and that's the world we live in.
And you won't get your kids' love. So it's sort of like, it's always been profit, but it's always been profit. And now that, you know, hopefully, do you think the government's moving fast enough to give some kind of tax incentive for this too? Or what's the next step to really speed this up, other than, you know, sort of ethics? Or, I mean, the profit numbers are going up, the taxes are
I think the first thing that's happening is capitalism itself, and kind of, again, profits are getting hurt. So that's an important thing, and it's kind of driving that acceleration. But what you're seeing is, yes, governments, and I'm not a big, you know, I'm in capital markets. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of regulation, but here it's needed because you need more transparency. You need a consistency of the information. And what you're seeing now is regulation is coming. It's already in Europe. So the other thing that's catching the industry by surprise is that, you know, we talked to the Fed. They've hired a climate change person. We don't know what they're really there doing or how that's going to manifest itself, but they're asking us questions. We talked to the SEC. They've hired a climate change person. Insurance regulator has hired a climate change person. So this regulation is coming, and we're seeing it ahead in Europe. So that's another thing for companies, that it's one thing to greenwash and do a lot of talking around this. Now the regulations are coming in. And by the way, everyone's trying to learn. So these first sets of waves of regulation, they're not going to get it right. And everyone's scrambling to understand, what does it mean? Are my clients going to care? We put ourselves first from an ESG perspective, because it's also our DNA. We manage money for TICREF. We're talking about faculty and staff across universities. They've always cared about this. But now you've got the Morningstars of the world. You've got the Towers Watsons and other consultants coming in. We're going to rate you on what you're doing. You've seen that, you know, somebody may say, well, we vote and we're for this, and then you find out in all their proxies they didn't vote that way. So this regulation is coming. whether it's the SEC, whether it's the Fed. And again, a lot of companies aren't prepared for that. I do a lot of work with the NASDAQ and know Adina Freeman well. We kind of supported her 100% in her disclosure rules that she puts with the SEC around diversity. But you're seeing this with climate change as well, where this stuff is coming and companies are not prepared for this and they're scrambling. And that's where you're seeing the greenwashing. You're seeing, I won't name the names, so you turn on the TV and you hear a lot of folks talking about what they're doing, but the regulation is coming and firms are really scrambling to keep up with it.
That's interesting. Well, your turn, and just don't be as shy as them.
Yeah.
Talk.
I will forcefully disagree. No, I think this, what I'll say is an and statement, like it started in risk, we're now in opportunity, and if you don't see both sides of the coin, you're probably gonna miss the economic opportunity, which is probably why most people are now tuning in. I mean, 2020 was a seminal year. However, I just want to kind of roll the clock back, not to claim pioneership because it is not me, but I just happened to join a firm called Generation Investment Management back in 2004. I was coming out of business school. Oddly, prior to business school, I was doing both social enterprise work and then conservation forestry in southern Chile with a Fulbright fellowship out of undergrad. I was passionate about the bioeconomy. I never in a million years thought that that would translate into an investment career. But I met a firm that was going to put sustainability at the core of its investment process back in 2004 and 2005 because it believed that you could deliver outperformance for your clients if you did so. So this was kind of radical at the time. My founding partners include David Blood, who was formerly head of Goldman's asset management business, and former Vice President Al Gore. It doesn't surprise you that those two people would come together with this passion for sustainability and a true belief that this was the way to invest. So we didn't have money when I joined. We had 0 assets under management, and I joined as both first a thematic analyst doing systems research, and then as a public equities analyst because we launched our public equity strategy in 2005. And in 2005, we started with this, it isn't just risk, it has to be opportunity, and that kind of balance for us was what I think helped us build a now 30+ billion long-only listed equity strategy. And on top of that, we have about $3 billion of private equity, which is now what I spend my day hours on. And sort of forests have always been kind of popping up in many parts of Generation's ecosystem, not surprisingly. On the public equity side, I used to cover the timber REITs back in the day, so companies like Plum Creek, and thinking about highest and best use and whether that could be conservation outcomes, not just for wood products and real estate development, but thinking about ecosystem services and carbon markets back early on in 2007 and 8. And then in the private markets, we think about disruptive technologies and businesses that are driving the transition to a sustainable future. That will include data science businesses leveraging and supporting sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry solutions. And then Generation also has a holding or a kind of a GP stake in a global sustainable TMO called New Forests, which has been globally one of the leading forest managers, putting, again, sustainable forestry practices to work at scale. And then finally, we have sort of lots of ambitions to focus on catalytic capital in green infrastructure to double down on our insights on climate and certainly decarbonization solutions in nature-based, but also hard to decarbonize kind of cement, steel, and building materials, industrials, and energy. So those are all the touch points at Generation. And I think this kind of, from a public equities perspective, even if a company isn't sitting in the timber sector, we query our businesses on supply chain. And if it's a real company that makes real products that has a single point of packaging, if they don't have a really comprehensive strategy on how are they sourcing their inputs and raw materials and how they are custodians of that supply chain, and we believe in a net zero commitment world, they are on the hook for that supply chain and the practices there, that's really where the rubber hits the road, coming back to kind of forests, to like invest in either deforestation-free supply chains. There's a whole host of ways that you can leverage the carbon markets as transition financing to structural decarbonization, and we query and kind of push our businesses on that.
So
as well.
when you go to, I was just going to ask that about specific advice or requests that maybe you want to ask for everybody about what to do specifically with forests and what to do in terms of funding or concentrating on how the trees can take a big role in getting us in a better position, which you mentioned too, but Jose and Karen, what do you think?
So one of the things that we want to work on with SBTI, which is Science-Based Target Initiative, and obviously you guys know they have partners in WRI, World Resource Institute, World Wildlife Foundation. So they have a lot of really good partners that can look at different types of technology, but also nature-based solutions. You know, when you think about the blueprint, right? If you're a corporate CEO and CFO, Jose said it best, it's a bottom line issue, right? This is not a nice to have, it's a must have at this point. And it's also not a bull market phenomenon, it's probably a bear market necessity in terms of dealing with ESG issues and carbon reduction issues. Because I think the regulation is definitely coming. It's not just about disclosure of ESG, it's climate risk regulation, it's also sustainable finance regulation, which is already happening in Europe. So everything as a bank, if we make any loan, it's going to be like, is the sustainable finance aligned or not, right? Then eventually it will lead to capital considerations. That just means the better projects, the greener project will get better treatment and hopefully cheaper pricing, right? So everybody will win in the fight, you know, towards the climate and in the journey to decarbonization. So to answer your question, if I had a crystal ball, I would say, you know, SBTI and all the NGOs and science community should really come together to say, what is a credible framework when you think about decarbonization before the technologies take place, you know, in every industry sector. SAF, you know, electrical playing in the aviation industry, nuclear, clean hydrogen in the hard-to-abate sectors. When you think about all of the other solutions in agriculture and fashion and consumer, before we have all of these solutions, probably it's going to take 10, 15 years. How do we maximize the use of nature-based solutions of green carbon, blue carbon, soil carbon? And how do we don't want to rely on that forever, right? We do want to develop technology, but there is probably a glide path to say, you should maximum, you know, use 30%, you know, your carbon footprint. You should neutralize that using nature-based solutions today. Maybe in 10 years, that goes down to 15%, right? Come up with a path that it's well supported by governments, by the science community, and it can help us bridge this gap that we don't have all the new technologies today. And perhaps in the long run, because we all know after 2050, 2040, what's going to happen is we have to be carbon negative to stay on the 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade. So the work is not done in 2050. We have to continue to use nature-based solutions. But maybe that's not 30% reliance today. Maybe we use that for 15% maximum, so you don't make people, you know, kind of stay complacent. But we need a framework like that. And the government, the G7, the G20 should embrace that to say, right, COP26, I mean, is some good going to come out of this, right? We should probably give people a framework and a playbook to say, if you're corporate, this is what you should be doing, and the balance between technology solutions and nature-based solutions, and make people feel comfortable. This is not greenwashing. We're actually doing good and doing well. It's not just carbon. I think as a video said, it's biodiversity, it's jobs, it's climate equity, right? This administration is talking a lot about climate equity or environmental justice. You think about the social aspect, you think about all the other aspects, it's really important. So I think that work is really important. Then we can finance it. Then we can put more capital into it.
Hey, Karen.
Right.
I forgot to read you. It said within 30 seconds. I'm sorry about that. I forgot. I didn't
you
read
know,
it.
This is
Sorry.
this is a really interesting kind of point. Because I was talking to Mary about this, where I do think there's a unique opportunity in kind of the role that forests can play towards a lot of these targets. You know, Bob, I go back to one of the questions you asked, and you saw how much, you know, forests could mitigate, you know, the carbon footprint. So it's a very efficient resource. Yet what you're seeing today is a lot of these firms claiming these 2050 targets. TIA itself recently announced that it has a target to go net zero by 2050. It was highly debated whether we would do that because we don't know how we're going to get there yet.
Is it realistic?
You know, we don't know yet, right? But what we do feel is that we want to push the leadership in that topic of finding that path. You know, in real estate, hard assets, we went to 2050 and now we pushed it to 2040 because we actually see a realistic path to get there. The point is, all these firms putting these claims out there, and they're going to be critical to uphold, especially from a brand and reputation. You're going to have to find an answer to do that. And that's where eventually you're going to go negative on this. But ultimately, in that path, it's that education. It's, you know, if you own forests, can you find the data and provide that transparency? Because there's going to be a lot of companies and firms out there that are going to be looking for ways to meet these targets.
Lila, I mean, I know I'm not going to use the 30-second one for you. You get to go just as much as they did, okay?
Hey, I was close to 30 seconds.
You were pretty good. Yeah.
You just tied me into.
That's almost long
I won't
form,
talk
as we saw on
anymore.
television.
I use my budget.
To me, I think there's this, so we every year Generation puts out a sustainability trends report, which is available on our website, generationim.com, but it's cataloging all the shifts we see in the market across all sectors related to sustainability disruption, right? So it's images. It's like Mary Meeker's Internet Trends report. It's 194 slides of what's happening across the economy, and you can download it and use the slides if you're giving a presentation on any sector. But one of the big ones was around kind of the risk of greenwashing, because we were just seeing commitments going up and to the right, which is fantastic, right? Net zero pledge. So, we're big supporters of the net zero asset managers initiative. There are about, 50 different groups that are getting on this bandwagon. 2021 is going to be the year between, commitments and action. And to Karen's point, the science-based targets, this is my one piece of advice. If you're a corporate and you're sitting and you don't even know what that term is, that is fine, because you have about 3 more months to get knowledgeable on what that is. And after that, I don't think it's going to be acceptable to say, well, we have a commitment, but we don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't know how to get there, because I actually have confidence that you will get there. But I mean, it's like we're gonna narrow the gap really quickly. So suddenly, by the end of this year, it's not just, it's going to be bottoms up, top down, and then real people, like you've hired tons of people, both of your institutions have hired teams, like the really great talent who are going to get us there. And I just think that that's kind of the thing to watch. And I would say even as a consumer, if you're picking companies and you want to kind of, either invest in companies or buy from companies, you should start to be aware of what are they actually doing in their supply chain. They may call it insetting instead of offsetting. To Karen's point, it has to be both. So I actually don't think people should jump on companies and say, you're offsetting because you're not doing enough. Everyone has to do everything in your own control, your scope 1, your scope 2, your scope 3, and also support, I think, carbon financing mechanisms. It doesn't have to be offsets, but it could be other forms of, credits, or even buying and being a custodian of land, investing in organizations that restore land, building ecosystem services. All of the above has to play. So that is way more than 30 seconds. But
Bob, you're not doing a great job of managing this panel.
I know. Because I know I got to get Rob up here to talk again. But I don't work for him, so I'll do whatever I want. Anyway, I just want to thank all, because it is true. We got to pass this over to Rob. But I just want to thank everything that you're doing for everybody here, because it's interesting. I tell this to people when I've covered global warming, is that it's every country that I've been to, especially non-developed countries, is that there is not this idea that the number one thing on their list is to sacrifice parts of their life, which are not exactly as nice as our lives, right? So I think it's almost the investment, the inventions to try to slow down what's happening in global warming is the one that's really only truly going to motivate people to do something. It's sad but true. I think people don't really want to sacrifice right now, especially in places where their countries were stepped on for too long, where other countries developed and became the richest in the world. They're not the ones that are going to sacrifice for us. I know that sounds skeptical, but I think it's like this impact investment, or whatever you want to call it, is that I think the ones that can probably motivate people. At least that's what I've seen in the world, which is why I think what you guys are doing is not just crucial, but maybe the only real way to do it. So hopefully the government's catching on to that, and the investors are catching on to that, and the journalism are catching on to it. So anyway, I just want to thank everybody, and for that, I want to thank everybody here, and now it's Rob's show.
All right, I'm going to do the same thing. So first of all, I just want to thank you, Bob, as our moderator, Karen, Jose, and Lila. You never worked for me, so thank you very much. Thank you all so much. Great. I think Karen asked a really good question, though, which is, why do a panel like this when a lot of this audience is already in the ESG and asset management business? Aren't we really preaching to the converted here at this panel? And it's a fair question. It's a good question. We're recording this, and so hopefully it's going to be disseminated in a much bigger way. But for me, the actual answer to that question is because I don't think that certainly we at the NFF, but I think overall, I don't think we've done a great job of connecting ESG, climate change, and our forests. Where do forests fit? You know, we talk about renewable energy a lot, we talk about electric vehicles, we talk about all kinds of things, and yet somewhere I feel like the nature-based solutions that you talk about, of which forests are one, forestation, stopping deforestation, planting trees, forest management, and the like, I think they're more relevant than ever. And so I hope we will help do our part at the NFF in honing that. And I think you each did a great job at getting into the details of how you would do that. And Bob, thanks for extracting that information from our panelists. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to invite all of you to please stay, mingle a bit. I'd love to, I haven't met all of you, and I'd love to say hello to all of you. We have plenty of great wine thanks to Jackson Hole Resort. Mary Kate Buckley, one of our board members, donated that for the event. I think we even have a little dessert and maybe still some hors d'oeuvres. We also have, before you leave, please take a gift bag. There's some great stuff in there for you that I think you'll all enjoy that's fun and good. But there's also a card in there that asks some questions about ESG and the forests. And more than anything else, I'd like to invite a discussion between you, your organizations, and the National Forest Foundation going forward. Thank you all so much. Look forward to seeing you in the moment.
Don't you love when I want to?
I just love it. 30 seconds.